Hello and welcome to the program, UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about the 1952 UFO invasion. That's correct, the 1952 UFO invasion. Before I get started, just let me say a special thanks to all the subscribers over on Subscribestar. It really means a lot and it really keeps the program going. Now, I found this article over at wearethemighty.com. wearethemighty.com. The title says the 1952 UFO Washington sighting that upended decades of denial. When UFOs apparently buzzed the Capitol, the Air Force needed answers. Now, this article is written by Daniel Tobias Flint, dated December 28th, 2025. It's got a little illustration here of these flying saucers buzzing the Capitol building. It says UFO hysteria in the U.S. began in 1947 with the Roswell incident, but peaked in 1952 after UFOs were sighted in the nation's capital. Now, I will say I think that the Roswell incident probably didn't cause as much excitement as some people think because they just tamped it down so much. Just before then, we had the sightings in Washington State of the flying saucers. There was a lot of stuff going on that was kind of building up to this, and then of course you had World War II and the invention of the nuclear bomb. Now it goes on here. It says, for most of the 20th century, unidentified flying objects existed at the edge of American imagination. They are part Cold War anxiety and part science fiction fantasy, and in part misunderstood natural phenomena. But over the last decade, public perception and government policy have shifted dramatically. What were once dismissed as flying saucer stories are now officially recognized as unidentified aerial phenomena and treated as legitimate matters of intelligence, aerospace safety, and national security. I would say that paragraph it's nice, but it's a little over on the positivity side. I'm still seeing a lot of resistance to even the idea that these things exist. It goes on, it says, this change did not occur overnight. It emerged from decades of sightings, decades of unanswered questions, and an accumulation of credible reports from military pilots, radar operators, and intelligence personnel. To understand why Congress, the Pentagon, and the intelligence community suddenly began treating UAPs with seriousness, it helps to revisit one of the earliest and most astonishing cases. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident was an event that shook the nation's capital and set a precedent for the government's complicated relationship with unexplained aerial encounters. Well, I would say complicated would be a very nice way to put that. A new era of transparency. In recent years, the government has adopted a more structured and open approach to UAPs. Instead of dismissing sightings out of hand, agencies now treat them as anomalies worthy of investigation. This shift can be traced to the release of military cockpit footage in 2017, showing objects that demonstrated extraordinary speed, acceleration, and maneuverability. The credibility of these videos, combined with testimony from Navy aviators, forced policymakers to acknowledge that the issue could no longer be relegated to science fiction. Well, I think it did wake up a few of our Congress people, but there are a lot of questions about how this stuff was released. It was actually a controlled release. I mean, when you're handing off videos in the Pentagon parking lot from a deep state employee to a former deep state employee, allegedly, and then releasing them online for a third party to monetize, it creates a lot of questions and it really creates an environment of distrust. And that's what happened back in 2017, my opinion. It says, as sightings continue to be reported and verified by advanced radar and sensor systems, the Department of Defense established the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force in 2020. Within 2 years, this effort evolved into the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, designed to study not only aerial anomalies, but also those detected underwater and in orbit. The shift carried an unmistakable message. These investigations were now part of mainstream defense analysis. Congress reinforced this view by holding multiple high-profile hearings. Lawmakers pressed Pentagon officials on the nature of UAP encounters, the potential threat they pose to national security, and the need for pilot reporting systems free of stigma. Testimony from highly trained aviators, with some describing objects accelerating faster than human physiology could tolerate, captured national attention. The hearings signaled a powerful turning point. elected officials were no longer asking whether UAPs existed, but rather what they are and why they are appearing with greater frequency. Yeah, I think it's important to point out that these things are moving so fast. Not only could humans not tolerate it, humans would just turn into jelly. The G forces are just not sustainable with a human body. Goes on, it says, yet none of this attention is without precedent. Decades earlier, the United States faced a similar moment when unexplained objects appeared not in the distant sky, but over the heart of the nation's capital. And then it says the story of Roswell, New Mexico begins in early July 1947 when rancher William Mack Brazil discovered strange debris scattered across the property. The wreckage was unlike anything he had seen before, lightweight, metallic, unusually strong, and covered in unfamiliar materials. Brazil brought pieces to the local sheriff, who then contacted the Army officers at Roswell Army Airfield. What happened next sparked one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. On July 8, 1947, the Army released a stunning announcement. They had recovered a flying disc. Well, this is what happens when they don't get the prepared narrative ahead of the story, and they just tell the truth, in my opinion. The press exploded with coverage, well, naturally. Headlines around the country proclaimed that the U.S. military had captured a crashed UFO. Well, they had said that. For a brief moment, the idea seemed almost officially confirmed, but within 24 hours, the military abruptly changed its explanation. The object officials now claimed was nothing more than a weather balloon. And we've talked about that so-called weather balloon at length on the program. There was a program in the area where they were releasing balloons to test for radiation from all the atomic bomb testing they were doing. But they've gone back. You can look all this up. It's verified. They've gone back. They've checked the records. And that day, there wasn't a balloon released because of weather conditions. So that whole thing is just a fabrication from what I can see. And I think pretty much anybody that looks into this will see this is what's called narrative control, forming a narrative so they can keep the lie going. The sudden reversal raised more questions than it answered. The initial declaration was unprecedented in its directness and felt too bold to dismiss as a simple misunderstanding. Soon, witnesses reported seeing unusual materials, strange inscriptions, and even rumors of additional crash sites. Over the decades, Roswell became the cornerstone of UFO folklore, prompting documentaries, government inquiries, and countless theories. In the 1990s, the Air Force released reports stating that the wreckage was from Project Mogul, a top-secret war program involving high-altitude balloons designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. That's what we just mentioned. This explanation, while plausible, did little to satisfy decades of skepticism. Well, the explanation is not plausible because we're able to go back and check the journal where they wrote down the release dates of these balloons, and it wouldn't have been possible because, like I said, there was no balloon release then due to weather. Many remain convinced that something extraordinary had crashed outside Roswell and that the government's shifting accounts reflected an effort to conceal the truth. Whether weather balloon, Cold War technology, or something beyond human understanding, Roswell remains the event that ignited America's modern fascination with UFOs. More importantly, it revealed how quickly official explanations can breed doubt when they change abruptly or fail to address eyewitness accounts. Well, when the narrative is changing all the time, it is an old saying, you can tell the truth once and it's fine. The truth will stand on its own. But if you're trying to propagate a lie, you have to change that lie constantly to accommodate new facts. And that seems to be what we see happening here. Now, it says in the summer of 1952, Washington, D.C. became the center of one of the most extraordinary UFO events in American history. Over 2 consecutive weekends, July 19th and 20th and July 26th and 27th, radar operators at both National Airport and Andrew Air Force Base detected dozens of unidentified objects moving across restricted airspace. These objects did not simply appear as static anomalies. They moved with purpose, accelerated rapidly, and changed direction in ways that defied the capabilities of any known aircraft. Commercial airline pilots and air traffic controllers witnessed the same strange lights darting across the night sky. Some described them as glowing spheres or streaks of white light. What made these sightings impossible to dismiss was the simultaneous confirmation across multiple radar systems, all of which aligned with visual reports from trained observers. The situation escalated to the point that the U.S. Air Force ordered fighter jets to scramble. Pilots made several attempts to intercept, but each time they approached the objects, they either vanished from radar or accelerated out of visual range. In some cases, radar operators reported that the objects seemed to circle behind the fighter jets as if anticipating their movements. To those who monitored the situation firsthand, the objects displayed intelligence, control, and technology beyond anything the United States or the world had at that time. The press soon learned of these encounters, and newspapers across the country ran sensational headlines about flying saucers over Washington. The proximity of the sightings to the White House and Capitol generated widespread concern. For many Americans, it felt as though the unknown had arrived at the center of American power. Well, it's 1952. I guess we are in the Korean War, but we've finished World War II. The United States is the world superpower at that point. Yeah, you can see why they might be interested in this. It says the growing anxiety compelled the U.S. Air Force to respond publicly. On July 29, 1952, the Air Force held a massive press conference, its largest since the end of World War II. The briefing was led by Major General John Samford, Director of Air Force Intelligence, who addressed the nation with a steady, authoritative tone. His goal was to calm fears without admitting that the Air Force lacked definitive answers. He attributed the radar sightings to a temperature inversion, a meteorological condition in which layers of warm and cool air bend radar waves, producing misleading returns. Visual sightings, he claimed, could be explained as misidentified stars or meteors. So basically just nothing to see here, sheep, move along. Yet even in his attempt to reassure the public, Samford made a striking admission. He acknowledged that while most sightings could be explained, a certain percentage involved credible witnesses describing events that could not be dismissed as illusions or weather phenomena. He maintained that these unexplained cases did not pose a national security threat, but his statement, which was delivered on national television, left the door open to the possibilities the Air Force could not fully address. Newspapers largely accepted the temperature inversion explanation, and public interest cooled, but many of those directly involved, including the radar operators, the pilots, intelligence officers, remained unconvinced. For them, the behaviors observed in the sky above Washington simply could not be reconciled with weather anomalies. So once again, we have the actual event. People see these UFOs flying over the White House, and then we have the story develops, and then the Air Force has to come in and try to create a secondary narrative to explain this stuff away. But people just aren't buying it. Now, as far as this 3-minute statement from Samford, I've done a podcast on it before. I'll do another one here on Subscribe Star at some point, just so we can maybe analyze a little bit of the body language on this. It's pretty interesting. It's all over YouTube, and you can find it there. A lot of people have loaded it. The title says Major General John Samford, 1952 Flying Saucers. I'm pretty sure it's in the public domain. The article goes down and says, the Washington, D.C. incident became a foundational case in American UFO history, shaping how the government approached unexplained sightings for decades. For much of the Cold War, the military responded to UFO reports cautiously, often emphasizing conventional explanations before acknowledging uncertainty. Projects like Project Blue Book attempted to catalog sightings, but often minimized their significance. Well, we see this over and over again, porting it as swamp gas. They're doing the same thing today. I mean, everything's a drone, right? So you just deny as much as you can, and then you leave a tiny little bit wiggle room there, and that way you have plausible deniability. I mean, it's just strictly mind control, basically, through narrative control. Says today the U.S. government's posture is markedly different. I would disagree with that. I think what's going on is they've just become a lot more advanced in how they handle this stuff. I mean, we had a case of what Matt Gaetz and a couple of other congressmen went down to the base in Florida and weren't even allowed to speak to all of the pilots involved in the UFO sighting down there. It's a real mess. The combination of modern sensor technology, pilot testimony, and transparency demands from Congress has created an environment in which unexplained aerial encounters are taken seriously rather than dismissed. Lawmakers have openly criticized past secrecy and demanded clear reporting channels. Military pilots now report sightings without fear of ridicule. I don't know about that. intelligence agencies are required to submit regular updates and to Congress about UAP activity. Yeah, uh, I would not agree with that. I think the updates are getting have really been glossed over. And as far as these meetings with Congress go, I mean, we've got certain of the UFO made member guys in there. Louis comes to mind, and they just seem to me like a turd of the punch bowl. I mean, you pull out a picture of a what you claim is a UFO, and within 10 minutes online, you have every internet sleuth out there showing you that it's actually an irrigation spot out in Arizona or Nevada someplace. Yeah, the big green circle, Louis, that's the irrigation circle going around spraying water. I mean, pathetic, man. And then there was the one I think he showed was supposed to be a video somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not. And then we end up with dozens of people pointing out that, oh, by the way, that had been debunked years ago. So there's something going on here that, of course, Louis has blocked me on his Twitter account. And I don't think that we're having a lot of transparency from government right now. If anything, I think we're having a lot of deep state players kind of being released into the ecosystem to change the environment and in turn control the narrative. That's what it looks like to me. If I'm wrong, tell me. It goes on and it says, the shift reflects a new understanding that unexplained phenomena in the U.S. airspace deserves attention. Then as congressional hearings continue and government agencies expand their investigation of UAPs, the search for answers enters a new chapter. The era of dismissing unexplained sightings as figments of imagination is gone. The United States now acknowledges that the sky contains mysteries worthy of scientific and military scrutiny. The problem here is we have whether you can call it what you want. I tend to call it a deep state, but we have these companies, some private, some public, especially in the defense community, that are tied in with the federal government. And if they have secured the knowledge of these UFOs, you can't FOIA those guys. So it's almost, to my mind, the intel the government possesses on the UFO phenomena is buried so deep within these special access programs and these defense companies that I really don't think we're ever going to find it. I don't think that the current politicians we have are ever going to find it because it's too valuable. Any disclosure that we come across is going to have to be on our own. Now, it finishes up here. It says, looking back to the 1952 Washington incident, it becomes clear that these questions have never truly left us. What has changed is our willingness to confront them honestly. Whether future research uncovers new technologies, atmospheric science phenomena, or something entirely unexpected, one truth is certain: the age of ignoring the unknown is over, and the pursuit of understanding has only just begun. Well, that's true. I'll give them that. Overall, a very positive written article. I mean, although I think it's probably a little too hopeful, but they bring out a lot of good points. And I think maybe from anything we can take from this is that at least by having these congressional hearings where a lot of the people that spoke, I'm not really too keen on. To me, they're just undercover intelligence agents at work formulating the narrative. But at least they've brought this subject to the forefront, and maybe there'll be a little bit less depersoning of people who happen to report these things, now going into the future. And even if you are talking to somebody who's a normie, an unbeliever, and a lot of times they'll say things to you like, well, I just think it's our own stuff, it's so advanced. Well, if that's the case, if our government has technology that is this advanced, that means they basically have the technology for free energy. Why aren't they sharing that with the rest of us? If they're able to put a human into a craft that can travel at those speeds and sustain those G's, that means they have technology that's beyond anything we know about. Why aren't they sharing this with the rest of us so we can use it for our healthcare system, which desperately needs all the help it can get right now? So at least, if nothing else, by bringing these sightings, these encounters, whatever, to the forefront through Congress, maybe some of the people that are unwilling to entertain the idea of UFOs and UFO technology will start to think, well, maybe if the government does have this stuff, then what's that tell you about the government? Where's my level of trust? Where should it be at with people who have all of this technology but are refusing to share even a tiny bit of it to relieve the suffering of the masses, to bring our standard of living up to what they aspire for themselves. That's the real question here. So, yes, have we made progress? Certainly. But have we made real progress? Not so sure. Hope you enjoyed the program. Hope you like this new format over at Subscribestar. Try to put some more stuff over here. Until next time, this is UFO Warning. Over and out.